Okay, so we are kind of reviewing last week material, and then we're going to go into some prerequisites and some fundamental talking about blockchain. I have it organized in such a way that I start very broadly, and then we kind of circle back and circle back and circle back. So we're gonna talk about certain concepts multiple times, but each time we go a little bit more in depth. But first let's try this one. So from last week, what cryptographic protocols do you know? What do you remember? So there are certain names and certain acronyms that you should remember. Yeah, symmetric, asymmetric. Yes, what else? Do you remember any algorithm? Yeah, AS, not ASO. Good. AS, Cesar, yeah. Diffie-Hellman, DES, great. And some hashing algorithms, nice. OpenSSL is not a protocol, it's like a framework, a toolbox for working with protocols. Good. So some things kind of are state. So what hashing function do you remember? Perfect. Good. So, oh my God, 42 quiz questions. Who designed this one? So it does not, the purpose is not to win. Of course it is to win, but like if you don't win, it's okay. The purpose is like to try and score as high as possible, right? So try to focus and try to sort of use your brain. What is the required element for all crypto systems to achieve security? What is a required element? What is a required tool to build, to help you to have security? So randomness. It's a little bit like the answers people usually say it's the key or something. It's like not technically true. So like if you don't have randomness, then you cannot really have the key, right? So remember that one, randomness. Okay. Another one. Okay, those ones are easy. So pseudo-random number generators. So because randomness is so important, we have a couple of questions about randomness, where we get it from and what are the properties. Perfect. And everyone is good? No? Okay. So pseudo-random number generator is a algorithm that spits out pseudo-random numbers, and it does not require a physical source of randomness, and the numbers it produces are not truly random. Yeah, eventually it repeats itself, yes. Do the produced numbers must have a uniform distribution? Yeah, that's a desirable property. So it would potentially be a correct answer. They should have like pseudo-random number generator. They should produce numbers with uniform distribution. There is a fun XCD comics cartoon. I don't know if you've seen it, like with the pseudo-random generator who produces random number 7, and it always produces random 7. So it's like random, but it's like very non-uniform in the sense of integers, right? All right. Next one. So it's the primary purpose of the seed. Okay, so this one should be all good, right? So we clarified what the pseudo-random number generator is. So now everyone should be correct. And most people are correct. So we discussed they are not truly random. Pseudo-random, not truly random. And to some extent, you could say this. You could say, yeah, because of the seed, they are to some extent unpredictable, but not really. They are like not knowing the seed makes them unpredictable, but knowing the seed and knowing the algorithm makes them really predictable, right? So this is complicated. All right. Lots of quiz questions, this one. So now we're talking about secure pseudo-random number generator. All right. Perfect. Very good. So we have to keep the seed secret. If the seed leaks, our pseudo-random number generator is not secure anymore because anybody can reproduce the sequence, right? So it has to like the seed must be kept secret. And then if the pseudo-random number generator is not uniform and does not have the strong properties, then what can we do on it? We can do cryptoanalytic attacks and we can derive some structure and we can probably reconstruct the seed. So if there is some structure, if those properties are not hold, then it is likely that someone will work it out and be able to recover the seed from the sequence because there will be some structure to it. So we want to make sure that there is no structure. So both of these are required. Okay, we're not doing bad. 5 behind us. Now we're talking about true random number generators. Okay. Could be confusing. So exactly, perfect. Very nice. So there is this kind of a philosophical question. So for example, we use certain quantum properties, or we're using some like so let's say we will use something on as a source of randomness from the computer. Okay, so we have this sort of environment in which the computer is placed, and a person is using the mouse or doing certain things, right? So then there is this kind of argument suggesting that to have so if you consider the universe as an okay, how should I start it? So let's start with circle. So if you have a circle, is perfect circle possible in the real world, or is it just a mathematical concept that you have a perfect circle? So a perfect circle, so it is sort of like if I have a square, and then if I kind of add extra, like I keep cutting it and keep making it into a circle. So a perfect circle has an infinite amount of like tiny, tiny, very tiny small sides, and it forms a perfect circle, but it needs an infinite amount of those sides, right? So mathematically, we say, yeah, we do have perfect circles because infinity is kind of feasible. But in the real world, do you think it is possible that perfect circles exist with infinite amount of sides, or do we have like to the Planck scale and there is like a minimum distance and we cannot go beyond that distance? So we can count. So instead of infinite, we have countable. We can count how many we have in a circle, right? So if we go to a Planck scale, so if I go to Planck scale and say, yeah, there is this like minimum distance which we cannot cut in half, then I have countable number of sides. So I don't have a perfect circle, right? And then it's sort of, we don't know, like we have no evidence that infinities are possible in the physical world. We reach the limit. We reach the limit of speed with the speed of light, and we reach the limit of like how much distance can be covered by the speed of light, and we cannot go beyond. Like we cannot say there is a smaller distance, which means infinities probably don't exist in the real world. So if infinities don't exist in the real world, that means we cannot have a true random number generator which generates infinite amount of different numbers forever, because then it would require a source of infinity somewhere. And then the known universe seems to not be infinite, like we always hit limits. And that's kind of a philosophical question, right? So if we say we don't have infinities and we have quanta, and quanta kind of like a discrete units, then maybe everything is working following a single kind of like digital algorithm, and everything is actually following this deterministic algorithm, right? So it is kind of like philosophical question whether the reality is actually deterministic or if the reality is non-deterministic. Yeah. Say it again. Yeah, but like, what is the underlying that, like, what is the mechanism behind this? Is the mechanism behind this sourcing the infinity from somewhere, or is it a deterministic algorithm which just kind of produces something that appears statistically random, right? So we cannot, like, it is true that we cannot predict, like if you have the universe like actually working as a single giant algorithm and producing the reality that we have, we cannot predict what will be next, because that would require us having a kind of a universe on a side which we could run the simulation and predict what will happen, right? So that does not exist. Like we don't have access to that. So predictability and determinism is a little bit two different things, because it is sort of like happening the way it has to happen, but we cannot kind of predict it because we are sort of inside it. So yeah, I mean, this is not really relevant, but it is kind of interesting to kind of think about it. And there is this argument that we live in the simulation and we cannot refute it because we don't have like mechanisms to sort of say that we don't. We have strong statistical suggestions that it is probably that we are living in simulation, but we cannot tell. And also we cannot tell if there are or not infinities, but we have very strong evidence that there are no infinities. And if there are no infinities, that means we cannot source the infinite amount of randomness from anywhere. Some physicists, they say, no, on quantum level, this is so, it's so different that there are infinities inside the quantum physics in the real world. But that, there are different opinions. It's kind of a nice movie called Deaths. I don't know if you watched it. Deaths. It's a British miniseries. It kind of talks about this a little bit. And in the movie, they kind of have a quantum computer which can sort of predict the universe forward and backwards. So it kind of leads to some interesting questions. Anyway, the good answer is it produces numbers that are statistically unrecognizable from randomness, and they are unpredictable, and they are uniformly distributed. So there is no structure, and they go forever, and there is no cycle, right? Okay, what's the key difference between the true random number generator and the pseudo-random number generator? You should list at least two differences. Yeah, so seed is only for this one. This one does not really have a seed. Yeah, that's good. That's good. But if you have two generators, what can you tell about them that this one is different from this one? So you don't observe the numbers, you just say generator A and generator B. So how they would be different? Like seed, like this one needs a seed. What else? What else will be different? So the one which is a pseudo-random generator, this one needs a seed, so you have to give it a seed. And once you give it a seed, this one does not need anything extra. It just produces algorithmically the sequence. And the real one, the true random number generator, you don't need to feed it with the seed. So there is no seed, but it has to have access to something. It has to have access to reality, to a real physical world. So something physical has to be connected to it. Otherwise, it does not have the source of the randomness, right? So it has to get the source of randomness from the real world. So the true random number generators, they always, in some way, hardware generators, which suck the randomness from outside, from the real world, from your mouse movements or from the way you're opening files and so on. So in Linux, you have this a true random number generator, which is kind of sourcing the randomness from the outside world, right? So that's the difference. The obvious difference is this one will cycle. It will kind of, at some point, it will kind of repeat the cycle of numbers. This one kind of continues forever, doing the randomness without cycle. It does not have a cycle. All right. So next one. Some are easy, some are a little bit harder. This one is easy. Yeah, most people got it right. So we use the randomness for generating keys. And then we use keys for encrypting or creating signatures. But primary use of randomness is to get the keys. Okay, this goes back to definitions. What's the difference between the pseudorandom generator and pseudorandom function? Yeah. So perfect. Very good. This is like this physical source of randomness. That's what the true random number generators need to use, but not a pseudo-random function. Perfect. So we're getting somewhere. Okay, which properties should random numbers should have? They should be predictable, reproducible, depend on the previous value, normally distributed, or uniform distributed. All the destructors are really wrong. So there is only one correct answer, and it's the uniform distribution. Why we don't want a normal distribution? So if I have a kind of a probability distribution function and I have this sort of a bump, let's say at half or something, right? So I have a normal distribution. Why we don't want this? We want a uniform distribution.
Some numbers are more
exactly. Some numbers are more frequent than others, and we have some structure. The moment we have some structure, we can work with it. We can kind of cryptoanalyze it and extract more information. So we want a uniform distribution. All right. What's next? What's the drawback of using pseudo-random number generators for cryptography? Yes, perfect. Everybody got it right. That's the biggest drawback. It also is relatively small. So when we talk about hashes, we often talk about 2 to the power of, 128 or something, right? We have, and that one is like a small hash, right? So we usually kind of talk about like 2 to the power big powers. What seeds do we usually use as a seed? What do we usually use as a seed? 2 to 64, like a long integer. If we are like really lame, we may use 232, right? So then like brute forcing and checking, like if you have a certain sequence and then you're trying to guess like what seed was used for that sequence, you can brute force it. And then the search spaces often are quite small. So you kind of need to make sure that you are using kind of a large numbers for seeding as well. Otherwise, a brute force attack will kind of leak. Like you can, like given a sequence, you can kind of guess what seed was used to produce it if you know the algorithm as well, right? Okay. Kirchhoff principle. We have to keep our algorithms secure. We should hide what algorithms we use. It's false. We should publish our algorithms. We should keep them public. What we call if someone tries to hide the algorithm they use? How we call it?
security by obscurity.
Exactly. Exactly. We can do it. It's very weak though. So we don't do that. All right. So what we should keep secret? Secrecy of what? So if the algorithm is not secret, we advertise, okay, we using this algorithm. What do we have to keep secret? So one word is the seed, but that's not that word. What is the other word? Keys. Keys have to be kept secret. Perfect. 6 responses. Fantastic. So seed also. Yeah, this one also. But this is like a entry point, and then what we actually are using are the keys, and the keys have to be kept secret. All the cryptography properties are kind of hanging on the secrecy of the keys. Yeah, brilliant. So far so good. Let's see how we will continue. So many questions. All right. That should be easy. Yeah, you cannot go wrong here. All of it is good. So in some multi-choice exams, that only this one will be correct, right? Because it's all of them. You have to kind of pick this one. But I was sort of friendly for guessing. All right. So next. What is not property of a secure cipher? Easy. Yeah, we just talked about it, so that was easy. Okay, so now we have the statement. The cost of breaking the cipher should exceed the value of the encrypted information. And what does that mean? How could you summarize it to someone? You're explaining to your mom about cryptography, and you want to, and she saw this, and she asked, yeah, what does that mean? Yeah. So those are all good answers. But if you want to generalize it even more, if you want to kind of make a statement, which is even more generic, what could you say? So you could say that there is no perfect encryption, right? That it is always that this is always the case. Actually, there is no like it's always a function of time and money versus the value of what it is protecting, right? So it's a little bit like Like when I was learning about cryptography and I learned there is no perfect, I was really like heartbroken because I thought there is like a perfect encryption that nobody can ever break, right? And then I learned no, that there isn't, and it's like, oh my God, my universe collapsed. But those are correct answers. All right, so keep going. It's a little bit. Um, you have to kind of use your head. Okay, again, a negative question. What is not a cryptanalytic attack? Yeah, this one is a little bit cheeky. So it's about vocabulary and like terminology. So cryptoanalysis, and it has certain categories, and then brute force does not belong to those categories, right? So brute force is kind of outside of the cryptoanalysis. We're basically giving up. We're saying there is no structure. We cannot do cryptoanalysis. We're just doing brute force. All the other ones are types of cryptoanalytic attacks. So if we only have ciphertext, it's ciphertext only. If we have some known plaintext, it's the known plaintext and so on. So the other ones are types of cryptoanalytic attacks that we can try. Brute force is not one of those. Okay. Yeah, that one is easy. Super easy. Yep. All right. So what we don't have in a symmetric encryption system? This one is super easy as well. Good. We don't have public keys in symmetric encryption. We do have the secret key that we have to keep secret. Okay, a technical question. I would make a mistake on this one, but because I went over it so many times, I kind of remember now, but I was always confused with this one. We went over this last week. So it's 56. The block size is 64. All right. Yeah, if you don't know, you don't know. It's fine. This is like a recall question. Some of them are more conceptual, some are recall, right? Okay, so AS, this is a conceptual question. You should know the answer. Like how big something is, yeah, you don't have to remember that. But what something is, you should remember. Yeah. Do you remember? No, you don't remember. So this is like, it's a modern incarnation of those very old ciphers that we talked about, like the substitution and permutation, right? And it is basically a substitution permutation network. It does all those two operations to do this diffusion confusion matrix, and then it produces this sort of randomness at the end. But like behind the scene, we go back to Cesar, cipher and the very simple ones. So it's just like a clever way of doing something we knew for like 3,000 years. Modulo arithmetic is used in a different one. Right, so this one is a bit sneaky. So do you remember RC4? No, you don't. So the answer is false, but RC4 was used in wireless security for web and for early versions of WPA. So RC4 was used for web and WPA, but why this statement is wrong, is false? Because RC4 is not a block cipher, it's a stream cipher, right? And for wireless communication, we don't want to use block ciphers, we want to stream. So the answer is false, not because it wasn't used, but because it is a stream cipher, not a block cipher. So it's a bit of a sneaky question. Okay, a little bit more about this one. Okay. We talked about the modes. We went really quick through the modes. But we spent time on ECB. We spent time on this one. And we talked about counter. We didn't talk too much about this one. And then then we have the answer, right? So yes. Okay. This is how much you pay attention to the class. It decrypts in 64-bit blocks, but what is this key size? It was like 2 slides ago. 56. Yeah, that's right. All right. All right. So let's have a 10 minutes break and we will continue. So you kind of get some fresh air or something. All right. Do we have everybody back? Almost. Yeah, let's wait a few more minutes. So what is not true about RC4 stream cipher? Size, it was widely used for SSL TLS. It is a cipher with 56-bit key. Okay, you may not know it if you don't remember the RC4. So then you have to guess. But it was like these two are exclusive. So it either has a variable key size or it has a fixed key size, right? And it's a question about what it is not. And RC4 has a variable key size from like 48 bits to 2046 or something. So it has a variable key length. So that means, yeah, this one is kind of false. But yeah, you may know. Anyway, RC4 is not used now. RC4 has been demonstrated to be weak. So web, as we talked last week, is not, I mean, some people still use web, but you're not supposed to use it because it's like not secure. So what do we use now? Yeah, that's a good guess. Well, we did use RC4 because it's a stream-based cipher. We used it for SSL and TLS. We use something different now. Yep. So we use something which is this one. But it's a little bit surprising. Like this is a hashing algorithm, so we cannot use this one for encryption. This one does not exist, so we kind of using AES. But AES is a block cipher, right? So it's not a stream cipher. Normal AES is a block cipher for encrypting data, but not suitable for streaming. And then the GCM kind of counter mode is an extension to the traditional AES, which enables it to be used as a stream cipher. And it is currently used everywhere. So it is used when you're using SSH, HTTPS, or the latest TLS. So it's sort of like a modern reincarnation of the stream cipher, replacing the RC4. And it uses hello field hash. And that's kind of a little bit of a history behind it. So I went a little bit into the rabbit hole in preparations because I was kind of investigating like the sizes of the spaces and how it came about, and why the name is what it is. And it's basically a French mathematician, which was kind of which is behind this Galois fields. And there is kind of interesting story. We had in the first week, we talked about the 21-year-olds, which were kind of famous, but this one is a 19-year-old. So he did all his math and all his inventions by the time he was 19. And then he solved some of the polynomial questions which mathematicians couldn't solve for like 300 years. And he had a little bit of a turbulent history, like getting his answers published. But like he eventually got recognized post-mortem, and he's sort of famous for this field and polynomial work that he did. And he kind of did everything by the time he was 19. So we all using like HTTPS thanks to this like a teenager who was just keen on math at 1800s. He had good, it was a good time to be a mathematician back at that time. So there is another fact about him that he was killed in a duel, like with pistols, and supposedly because of the dispute over a woman. But there is a more likely hypothesis that that woman thing was just a cover story for actually getting him killed, because he was a very opinionated activist, pro-republic, and it was kind of in the opposition to the government at the time, and they basically sort of eliminated him. So yep, he had kind of a short, very turbulent life, but he's sort of at least his name is in one of the protocols that we use today all the time. So why this one showed up? All right. So AES, we talked about AES again. Have you paid attention? So the pure AES is a block cipher, and the GCM extension makes it into a stream cipher. So another question about AES. Again, this one you may not know, and you don't need to know. Like you can guess. If you don't know, it's fine. Yeah, close. There is this odd 192, which has been used as well. All right, so then we all right, so then Caesar cipher, a substitution cipher, used in military, like 2000 years ago. Again, I did a bit of digging, and it turns out there is no evidence that at the time of life of Caesar, anybody broke that cipher actually. So at that time, nobody worked it out. And the key shift that they used apparently were either 1 or 3. So if you think about it, it's like with shift of 1, it's like almost obvious. And even with shift of 3, that would be kind of like you could probably break it with your head. Like you don't even need to write. Yeah.
Did they use space?
Uh, we don't know. Yeah. So it's kind of and it was considered unbreakable, right? So at least at that time, it was not broken. So it's kind of a funny because it is one of the simplest ciphers you can have, and it's something that you kind of can obviously break quite easily. So yeah. All right, so let's try some Cesar questions. So if you have shift 4, what will be the A mapped into? Trivial. Very good. And then so how many symmetric keys do we need for 1,000 people to communicate securely? So if you were to make 1,000 people communicate securely one to one, how many keys would have to be exchanged? We talked about it last week as well, and we even kind of derived a formula for this. So right? You remember the formula? N times n minus 1 divided by 2. So that's how many keys we would have to exchange. So it's like almost 500,000 keys, right? It's a lot of keys. So that's quite bad situation. So now if we want to do that for asymmetric, for public keys, how many keys we would have to do? How many keys we would have to communicate? Yep, perfect. So obviously, asymmetric cryptography improved a lot of things, right? Okay, so a little bit about, yeah, we had it last week as well. So that should be straightforward. Come on. I will count it as misclicks. All right. So then we talked about it last time as well, that NSA wanted to classify it as a secret. It didn't really work out as a secret. So then apparently there is a story that he worked out, that Rivest worked out all the math in like one night. He was just working through the night and he came up with the paper. And then it turned out to work fine. So that was 1977. And then they put the patent application, the three guys, all three of them, but Martin Gardner's kind of published the puzzle for RSA in the Scientific American in August. And that meant in most jurisdictions, if there is a prior public disclosure, then the patent cannot be granted because the public knew about it before the patent was granted, right? So in most countries, if you have a public paper or public disclosure, then you cannot patent it. In US, you have a grace period, or I'm not sure if it is still the case or it was back in the day, probably it's still the case, of 1 year that the inventor can disclose it publicly, but then has a 1 year to patent it. So in US, the patent was granted, actually it took a long time. The patent was granted in 83, but it was enforced in US, and Apple and Google and everybody, and like Cisco, everybody using like RSA technology for encryption, they have to pay patent fees. But in 2000, it kind of went back to public domain. In all the other countries, it never was patented, and everybody everywhere, like in Europe, could use it for free without paying any royalties. So it's kind of an interesting business kind of oriented situation. So this one we talked also about last week. No, we didn't. This one we didn't. This one is a new one. So how long it took? So RSA 129, yeah, we talked a little bit about it last year, last week, I mean. So in 1977, there was a calculation that it will take very, very long time to crack it. And then 1600 computers and 600 volunteers cracked it in 8 months. In 17 years later. So from 1977, if we add, so it was 93, 94. So they've done it like for 8 months during that time. So it like you had to wait 17 years, but after you waited 17 years, then it took 8 months to actually crack it, right? The technology at that time was not possible. So that's why those two answers are correct. So technically it took 8 months, but those 8 months were not in 77. Those 8 months were in 93, 94. And I also learned that there was another guy who invented RSA like 4 years before the Rivet. So there was this guy in UK who invented RSA, exactly the same algorithm. And he was working for the government communication department, which is sort of like a secret service in UK. The UK has two kind of units. One is gathering the human intelligence, and it's called MI6. You might have heard of it. And the other one is called, government communications, and that one gathers information from communication networks. So from networks and telephone networks and from anything that can be kind of obtained automatically, not involving humans. The other one is mostly with humans. This one is mostly with technology. And this guy was working there. He invented the algorithm. It became a top secret. And then it was not released until 97. So like nobody knew about it until 97, even though in 77 it was the Rivest and Shamir and Adelman kind of did the same in US, right? So it is kind of a funny story because it sort of highlights the attribution. We sort of attribute RSA to those three guys, but there is this guy who nobody almost knows about, who kind of did it like 4 years before them, right? And he doesn't get any kind of recognition, to be honest. So it is a little bit, yeah, unfair, you might say. And he was a mathematician, so the other guys as well. Right. Yeah, this one we talked about last week. So this one is easy. Yeah, I checked if it is still the case, and apparently it's not. Okay, so the guy Phil. So this is the guy who is an activist for privacy, kind of a privacy proponent, and he is behind the PGP, the pretty good privacy framework for encrypting emails. So he was kind of in trouble by sharing his key because it was sort of violating the weapons, control. All right. Yeah. So today, what's the situation today? So it is regulated. You have to, yeah, comply with regulations, but it is not like a blank ban as it was before. Okay, so this is where you keep your keys. So we either use RSA or we use the elliptic curves. If you're generating yourself SSH keys, you using one or the other. Well, 10 questions left, so we're almost there. And some of them are quite practical. So this is Alice signing. Again, similar question to the one we had before. But now she signs the document. Yeah, perfect. So when someone signs something, then anybody can verify the authenticity, right? It's not just for Bob. Like anybody can take Ali's signed document and Ali's public key and check that it is actually correct. But when she sends a message to Bob, only Bob can decrypt it. Right. Okay. This one might be confusing. We kind of rushed a little bit through Diffie-Hellman. So we have those different methods. What's important for Diffie-Hellman? Yes, it's not prime factorizations. So where do we use prime factorizations? RSA. In Diffie-Hellman, it's discrete logarithms, and in IS, it's this network of, substitution and. All right. right? So a little bit confusing question, I guess. Is it only for Diffie-Hellman that it's vulnerable to man in the middle because it doesn't have authentication, or any system without authentication is potentially target for man in the middle? Huh? Every, right? So it's not just Diffie-Hellman. So any system that we have without authentication is potentially a target for a man in the middle attack. All right. Okay. Which hash function you should not use anymore? Easy. We had it last week as well. Yep. Conceptual question, how we call it. Avalanche property. Yeah, it's you could conceptually you could say it is related to diffusion. But diffusion is a little bit different. So the avalanche property is like it has, yeah, I guess conceptually it is kind of similar. Yeah, I guess diffusion, like we talk about diffusion every time we go into kind of a larger space. So with diffusion, the way it is in AES, for example, we go into those kind of stages where we say we have some sort of information and we kind of diffusing it to a bigger search space, and then we kind of combining it. With the hash, we don't, because it always is the same slots. We only have the same slots, so it is related but kind of different. So the avalanche property is like we affecting more within the space which we have. Diffusion says we have some information and we kind of spreading it, and then we sort of like reconciling it, but the spreading is the diffusion, like we're spreading it over a larger search space, right? So it's a little bit different mechanism. Yeah, so a birthday paradox, we talked a little bit about it, and that's why we kind of need longer, working with very short hashes, it's not like it has a weak properties against the birthday type of attacks. Yeah, that one you should be able to answer just by thinking about it. Yeah, so we adding salt to get extra randomness or extra unlinkability. You could think of those two, right? Because we need to add authenticity, so we have to kind of add one of those two, but like full-blown digital certificates would be too heavy, so we're just having a key, right? So you can kind of reason about it. Like why we adding salt to hashes? So we have a password, we have the hash function, and then we have the the hash of the password, right? So we're kind of going this way, and then someone gets this, and tries to brute force it. So we kind of adding, okay, we kind of saying, okay, we're not only hashing the password, we have some sort of salt. So then we making the link harder, because now someone needs to know the salt as well, right? It's like knowing the hash, knowing like this value is not enough to go back, because it is like in addition to the password, there is also this sort of extra element which someone needs to kind of know to be doing the recovery or the attack. So it's to introduce extra kind of extra layer of this unlinkability between this and the actual value of the hash, right? A timestamp, we usually don't care, but like HMAX may have like a time limit. Sometimes we want to do that. Okay, so in your like self assessment, where would you put yourself in those different topics that are from last week? So substitution transposition ciphers are the ones which we talked, the old ones, old-fashioned ones, and the new modern reincarnation like AES are basically the same concept. It's just used in a little bit more like a repetitive way through a sort of a chain of operations which form a network. But the foundations are exactly the same. RSA, we talked the factorization of large numbers. And then Diffie-Hellman, we didn't dive too much into it, but it's just the protocol for doing the handshake and kind of a key exchange. Hash functions, we spent some time on, and then the digital signatures we spent some time on, but not diving into the actual the details. So yeah, looks reasonable. So where do you use digital signatures for? Yeah. Banks or email communication, websites, yes. Yeah. Good. Okay, 4 more questions. Yeah, those are kind of a practical questions about what have you used if you try to do some of the tasks. Yeah, this one is a little bit unclear. Like it has a yeah, we use SSH keygen. So where you put the keys to be able to log in? What's this one? Yeah, there's a public key. If you generated like a new key with RSA for yourself, and it's called ID RSA. So then ID RSA will be the private part, and ID RSA pub will be the public part of that RSA key. So that's the file which is usually stored in .ssh. What's this one? What's inside this file? So this file has public parts or like the signature of the servers that you connect to, such that you already know that they are legitimate. So every time you SSH to something and you don't have that someone, that server in your known host file, the SSH client will ask you, oh, do you trust that certificate? Do you trust that key pair? Because I see it for the first time. Why we do this? So why we have this file and why we do this? So it's like your machine is here. You have this known hosts file. And then when you connect to your Linux server, for example, via SSH, your client will say, oh yeah, I don't know this server. Like this server has this public key. Like, do you trust it? And you say, yes, I trust it, and it will be added here. Why we do this? Yeah, so you don't have to confirm it every time. And then what is the main reason why we're doing it? Exactly. To ensure that it is that if you say, let's call this one like my Linux .christiania.no. So if you say SSH to mylinux.christiania.no, it goes here, it gets the handshake, gets the key, and then you know that the key is the same, and then you kind of connect. But if you get someone in the middle, you get like a man in the middle who pretends to be your server, they will show you the key, but it's different. And then what happens in your client? What happens when that situation happens? Did it happen to you? It could have happened to you if you have a VM box, you SSH to it, you said, yeah, it's a known server, and then you have to rebuild it, like you reinstalled it. And then the key on the server was regenerated. You have a different key. It is still your server, it's just like it got a new key, right? You didn't copy the old key, you like rebuild your Linux and you have a new key. So then what the client will do? So your SSH client, when this situation happens, that the key don't match to this one, what it will do? It will throw a panic. It will say, oh, Lou, yo, someone is like messing up with your keys. It's not a trustworthy connection. I'm going to drop you out. And then you cannot connect. Like when you say SSH here and the key is different, it will not allow you to connect. You have to go and remove that known key from your file for SSH clients to allow you to connect again and like rebuild the trust, right? So it will kind of catch this situation and it will say, no, we're not connecting, we don't trust it, and it's wrong. Like the host gives you the key, which is different to what it used to have. So we're not connecting. So for you to connect, you actually have to manually go and remove that entry from your known files. Otherwise, it will not allow you to connect. So that's what known host is for. And then authorized keys is for you to be able to connect to yourself, like to that machine, right? So authorized keys is like you have the public key and you kind of say, yeah, I'm kind of, you have the private key, but you put in there your public key. So when the handshake happens, it checks that that you are who you say you are and you are authorized to actually connect via SSH. It does it by like a request response. So it basically encrypts something with your public key, sends to you, you have to decrypt it and send it back, and then the server compares, saying, yep, you prove to me that you have the private key. All right. Yeah, so this is a symmetric question to the one that we had before. You can, if you don't know, if you haven't used the command line, you can pretty much guess this one. Yes, perfect. Yeah, almost perfect. And the last one. Last question. Oh, not the last one. There is more. This one we talked about last week. Yeah. So that introduces the structure, which then can be exploited. And we talked about it like with the high Hitler or something like. All right. So there is one more. I thought about this one. So what you have to do. So you set up your Linux server, and now you want to disable password logins. Why would you like to disable password logins to your Linux server? Yeah. 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 So why? Why is the cryptographic login better than the password login? It's more secure. It's much harder to brute force or to break. And also most of the systems like the script kiddies, which try to find like and reuse like password dictionaries and check servers who have vulnerabilities and use like password or whatever, they will kind of bombard you. And then because you disallow password logins, you can basically cut all this traffic out. So it is also helpful for making sure that you are not like target for those type of attacks. So what do you have to do before you disable password? Yes. So make sure that your keys are there. Yeah. And your keys seem to be there. What else you should do? Yes, you should do this. So you try it. Try to log in with SSH. And if it works, that means you correctly configure it. What will happen if you don't try it? And then you disable password login? What can happen? Yeah, you may kill your access. Like you may not be able to connect. And then you cannot fix things if they are broken. It happens sometimes. It's very painful when it happens. Another one which is painful is when you reconfiguring something on your Linux in connection to the network access, and you kind of kill your network access to the box as well. So like with firewall rules or something, like you fiddling with the network and over SSH, and then suddenly you kind of kill yourself, you kill access to yourself, right? Then what happened? Like what can you fix? Like how can you recover from it? So you were SSHing to your box, you were kind of fixing something with network or whatever, you were setting firewall rules, and then you killed access to your to SSH. So now you cannot SSH. Then what can you do?
Go to the server.
You have to go physically to the box, right? You have to get a physical access to the box and do something with the keyboard and monitor on the box directly, right, without network access. That is painful. So again, last week, I told you about this sort of virtualizations and some servers where you have kind of another Linux, which you can SSH to, which is like a BIOS. And then this BIOS has access to your box. And then if you kill yourself here, you can still telnet or SSH to this BIOS and kind of go into your Linux as if you were physically there, right? So it kind of replaces the physical access and gives you a virtual monitor and keyboard, but it kind of pretends as if you are physically there. And that's like for data centers, something that you sort of have to do. All right, perfect. So we went through this. I hope it was a good kind of refresher and sort of like you now are a little bit more familiar. Ivan, congratulations. Well done. And oops. All right. So let's have a break. Let's have another 10 minutes break, and then we'll jump into the blockchain introduction. For those of you who are installing MetaMask, maybe you should try it now. So I can kind of help you if you have questions, and then you will be able to kind of start collecting some of the tokens. So let's say, yep, so 10 minutes break, and then those of you who are so let me see. Right, so there is yeah, whiteboard. Okay. So about the wallet, you have so you have a network. So if we think about a peer-to-peer network of peers doing something, right? So this is the network, which is like a peer-to-peer network. We're gonna dive a little bit later into like the internals of how things work, but conceptually, if you think about it, okay, there is this network out there, and now you have a mobile phone or you have a browser, so mobile or browser, and then what you store is you effectively store keys. So you're storing keys that kind of allow you to see what is your status in the particular network. So in the browser extension, you generated kind of like a key for yourself, public key, private public key kind of pair for you to be able to do certain things with a particular network. And the keys that we have for Ethereum, they work for a certain class of networks that we can use the same key for. So your address, the address that you have in your wallet, kind of opens up a possibility for working with multiple networks, including the Ethereum, like the mainnet Ethereum. But Sepolia is a testnet, which is for testing things. And that key that you have works with Sepolia. So this initial like password is for opening up the vault. So the password is kind of only used for opening up the vault. And then you have this 10 or 12 words, which are actually the generators for the address that you are using. So those words, if you took a photo or if you store them, you can now recreate the same wallet in your mobile application or in another browser or somewhere else. So like this is the the actual thing that stores or generates the keys which allow you to do something with the network. So those words are super important. You should never leave them in a public space in like a Google Drive or iPhone photos or Google Photos or anywhere else in a public space. Like this has to be a secret. So this is your secret, which you keep as a secret. You don't store it anywhere in a public space. Obviously, for the lecture and for the toy tokens, it doesn't matter. Like if someone steals your Sepolia tokens, like who cares, right? But normally you should make sure that you should make sure about two things. One thing is that those words are secret and your password is secret, because the password kind of encrypts the wallet. So if someone cracks your password, they will get to your wallet, right? And the wallet is secret. And second, that the wallet is stored in two places. So when one place gets stolen or corrupt or whatever reason, like you lost that one spot, you have the backup. So like you kind of need to have a backup of this. How people do it? It kind of depends. Like it depends of seriousness of what it is. If it is like fun thing and not super serious, then you just make a copy somewhere, like on your laptop, and then encrypt it and store it maybe in a Google Drive or somewhere else, right? So, but you kind of need to back up your wallet. So if you installed your mobile wallet on a mobile device, on iPhone, for example, then make a copy on your laptop. And if you install it on your laptop, make a copy on your phone, okay? And then you have two places, you have two devices. So someone needs to steal two devices for you to lose it. Some people store it like on a piece of paper and they put it somewhere in a book or somewhere, such that they can recover it without digital means. Some people use encrypted partitions and blah, blah, blah. So there is different mechanisms for you to storing it. But if you want to use it for real cryptocurrencies, you have to kind of maintain at least those two properties. So one property is that you keep your wallet secret. You don't kind of plain text it anywhere. And then the second one is that you do have a backup. You cannot have a single point of failure. Yeah. I cannot tell you. All right, so we will come back to that later, but because we are using this Sepolia network and because the same keys are used for Sepolia and they can be used for Ethereum and some other networks, you kind of need to be aware of like the mechanics and like what not to do. So one thing's not to do is like to take photo and it goes to a Google Drive or Photos or something, because then Google knows it. And then all the bots and all Google AI knows it, and like it's not a secret anymore, right? If something goes to a cloud, Google Cloud or Apple Cloud, it's not a secret, okay? How about the iCloud? How about the keychain? For example, from Apple, and then iCloud backup of the keychain. Is that a reasonable assumption of privacy? What do you think? No, it's not. But for things that don't matter a lot, can you use it? Yeah, sure, you can use it. But for things that matter a lot, or for things that you really want to keep private, you cannot use it. Same with Google or same with other things. Some of my friends, they use network-based password managers. I know they kind of are end-to-end encrypted, and I know that they should work as advertised, but I have my skepticism and I have my worries, so I often don't do that neither. I use password managers, which are offline, and they are kind of not network-based, such that my keys are not stored in central places, even if that is encrypted. Why do you think it may be a bad idea to store something in a central place, even if it is encrypted.
If they get hacked?
They can get hacked, exactly. And they can get like, they can get certain law enforcement forcing them to do certain things certain way by leaking something, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of possible attack vectors and like things that I cannot personally control, which make me a little bit uneasy about network-based password managers. But I have, as I said, I have friends who are really paranoid about security and they do use them. And they say, we kind of trust that those extra attack vectors are not a key factor. And it's much more convenient because then like this kind of centralization offers a lot of convenience. If you don't do that, then a lot of things require manual kind of labor. But anyway, this is like, we will come back to that later. At the moment, just remember that those 10 words, you need to store them somewhere, and then you can reconstruct your wallet anywhere else later if you have those 10 words. What happens if you forget your password? Well, you cannot get to your wallet, but if you have those 10 words, you can reconstruct it again from scratch, right? Okay, so I will talk a little bit about myself. Let's go back to the lecture. This is the article from in-flight newspaper in Norwegian. And I think it was maybe 2018. They were really hyped about going into virtual currencies and like using it as a payment method and so on. So they were sort of seeing it as a future of payments and finance. And why do you think that they were kind of pushing that? Why do you think they were sort of betting on people paying through cryptocurrencies? Yep, exactly. So the current financial systems are quite expensive. They have a lot of intermediaries, and those intermediaries often are monopolies. And those monopolies kind of really crank up a lot of fees and a lot of extra friction into the system that like does not have to have that friction anymore. So Norwegian and other big kind of stakeholders, they saw it as an opportunity to sort of shortcut some of that and sort of bypass some of the fee payments, which is a reasonable, like a use case. So interestingly, a lot of transactions which happen currently in crypto are based on so-called stable coins, or like equivalent of US dollar. And those became sort of a very frictionless means of like money transfer because the fees are very negligible and the stability of the kind of the stable coins is sort of given. They are equivalent to other currencies, but they bypass that sort of financial system that we have. So it at that time it has been sort of a hyped kind of a technology, but it went through the hype cycle, and now it is in sort of a mature stage where we can see, especially with the 2025-26 downturn of some of the speculations and some of the speculative use and like meme coins and so on, they are kind of dying out, like at least slowing down. So some of the things became kind of more serious and more mature. I was checking recently that the top 50% of largest businesses in US, so 80% of them adopted in some way or form blockchain technology in the infrastructure stack. So the blockchain technology kind of goes beyond just like cryptocurrencies. and it has kind of matured enough that people are kind of serious about it. A lot of, yes, of course, a lot of scams and still a lot of like get rich fast schemes exist, but they will always exist. But most of the research and most of the kind of adoption is on kind of a serious use cases. So what do we need to do we need to go through? So it's kind of a high level overview. Then there is some things that we already covered. So I'll go really quickly through them. And then we'll go a little bit into the like what kind of hides behind the surface. And then we'll go back into that again tomorrow and on Thursday. So we, as I said, some of the data, like for the blog explorers or CoinMarketCap, you cannot access from Christiania. You have to go through your own phone or like VPN. So to observe some of the content, you kind of need to do a little bit of trick. And then if you search for an address, so we can, yes, we can go, it's a little bit overwhelming, but we can, for example, go, here is a single address. We can go to that address, and then we can see where that address was used and how much money is left in the blockchain for that address, like how many unspent outputs that address controls, right? And here we see none, right? We see the balance of that address is zero. Like everything that address controlled is somewhere in the graph, but it's always already spent. Like nowhere in that address we have something that is hanging unspent, right? And then we have transactions. So all those transactions involve that address. And that address was used in how many? 2 transactions. One was, so where is the address? 1 EK. 1 EK is here. So from this address, money went somewhere, and then from this address, money went into 1 EK, right? So there are 2 transactions. One puts money into that address, and one spends, and then the address is empty, right? You can see that when 1 EK spent money, it's spent with 2 outputs. It was this address and this address being used, right? So you can see whoever controlled that address spent money to those 2, but didn't send money to itself, right? Like we don't know which one is the payment and which one is the change, or what is this. But usually if you have 2, that means one is the payment and one is the change, right? I mean, usually that's the case. So this one is more interesting. We can see that there was a single address which had 100 coins, and then there is a large number of outputs, which 30 outputs. And then if we search for this, for our address, which is 1 EK, so if I search for it, 1 EKF, then I can see that it's here, right? It's just once. So out of the 100 coins, this address got 4.3339, right? And then other addresses got certain values. So you kind of now get the feel of how you can follow the money, like how the money flows in the network, and that everything is sort of transparent, right? So, but at the same time, it's obfuscated because you have those addresses and they don't directly tell you who is behind that address, right? It's a kind of an address, but you don't know who is behind it. Any questions about this? Does that make sense? This graph makes sense to you? So this is pretty much UTXO. Why we have this kind of a complicated graph? one mechanism why they invented this kind of a complicated UTXO model is to maintain privacy. So to maintain a kind of a difficulty for finding out how much money someone has, right? So if you, for example, you have a friend Bob, and now you say, okay, how much money Bob has in the blockchain? You have no idea, right? What would you need to know about Bob to be able to tell how much money he has in the blockchain? Yeah, his addresses, all of his addresses, right? So if you know all his addresses, then you can kind of check and you can know how much he owns. But without knowing all his addresses, you don't know, right? So how many inputs and how many outputs a transaction can have? Arbitrary. The limit is the size of the block. So the blocks are limited of how much data they can store. And that also limits how much, how big the transaction can be in terms of inputs and outputs, right? But we do have transactions which have thousands of inputs and thousands of outputs, and they are kind of okay. But like millions, no, like only like thousands, small number of thousands. That's the maximum you can have. It depends a little bit on the blockchain and also a little bit on the fork of the blockchain itself, because the design of the protocol, of how the protocol works, decides what's the maximum block size or what's the maximum transaction size, right? So in Bitcoin, there was this big debate how big the blocks could be and so on. And they kind of forked into kind of two different Bitcoin implementations. And in one, the blocks can be bigger, and in one, they can be smaller, right? They cannot be as big. So it depends on which chain you are on, that will kind of work. If I copy that address and I go to a blockchain explorer, which is, let me see, Bitcoin blockchain. So if I go to a blockchain explorer which handles multiple blockchains, and I enter an address, so I enter my address and I search for it. It will tell me in which blockchains that particular address currently exists, right? So if I go to a kind of a more modern one, so let's say yeah, I go to this address and search one more time. It's also only in Bitcoin. But is it possible to have the address which is in more than one network? It is possible, because they kind of they are families of networks and they use similar structure for addresses, right? So in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin forks, the address structure is exactly the same. So it is possible that you have a single address in multiple networks. When we installed MetaMask and we say I want the tokens to go to Sepolia, that address is used in Ethereum, Sepolia, and so on and so forth. It is used across multiple networks, right? So if you put your address in the Explorer and have you use that same address in multiple networks, it will kind of show up in multiple places, right? All right, so let me go back. Where is my presentation here? So blockchain explorers, they help you to navigate this graph and to give you information about the blocks, the transactions, and the addresses, right? So a block is a collection of transactions. A wallet is a collection of addresses. And then transaction has inputs and outputs, and they kind of link how the money flows through the graph. Coin market cap is like the one of the biggest sort of aggregators for data about different coins. And you can kind of check the market capitalization, you can check the traffic, and you can check the price movements, what happens in the different currencies. You can also check like the ordering based on the market capitalization or whatever you want to check, with all the tokens that are there. For certain amount of time, you could check like how many there are, but it like currently it's such a big number, and also it's a little bit confusing of what constitutes a network and what constitutes like a second layer of the particular network. So all the like categorizations are a little bit blurred. So you can sort of like click here and see like an index of different networks, but as I said, it's sort of like it's a little bit difficult to categorize them because the boundaries are kind of blurred. So if we go, they store, yeah, it's about 9,000 networks. And this is like a very small compared to the amount of tokens which are on top of those networks, right? So yeah, so this is like the coin market cap. And then we have the explorers that I mentioned, and we also have like the data about what happens with the network. So this is the ledger part with this acyclic graph, but you also have the network itself. So if we network, right? You have the peers talking to one another, and now you kind of open your client, and your client will kind of connect to one of the nodes. And that's how you see your balance, because you will say, okay, for this address, can you tell me what is my balance? And then the node will kind of tell you, right? So here it will say, yeah, you have 10 coins. But if you want to make a transaction, if you want to pay, so if you create a transaction which says, I want to pay one of my unspent outputs. So you create a transaction with one of the unspent outputs. This is on the in, and you're paying Charlie. So you kind of using Charlie's address here, and you're saying, okay, I'm paying him some part, and then some change kind of goes back to me, to my wallet. I use my key here. So I split these coins into two. Then you create this transaction. You have to prove that you can unlock that input. So you have to do something. We're gonna talk about it tomorrow, like how you're gonna prove that you can do this. So you including the proof, and then you have to advertise. So you kind of proved it, you signed it, and then so there's a signature as well. And then you take it in, and then you say, okay, now I want to advertise it to the network. So you have to take this transaction and like give it to the node and say, yeah, please advertise it to the whole network, right? So then this one will advertise it to the neighbors, and then the neighbors will advertise it to their neighbors, and so on. So you kind of are doing a flooding of the information, and eventually that transaction is gonna be kind of available in all the nodes, and some of the nodes are mining new blocks. And when they're mining new blocks, they're including the transactions which are in so-called mempool. So mempool is the waiting list for all the transactions to be included in the blocks. And when you advertise it, it kind of put it into the local mempool, and then advertise it to others, and others put it into their local mempool, and so on. And then the miners are using the mempool to pick some transactions to be included in the next block, right? And then there are some I had it opened here. Yeah. So this is like all the transactions that are currently in the mempool, and they are either small or big, and they are being kind of decided of like what will be in the next block, and the miners are sort of like picking them usually by the fee. So the transactions with higher fee are gonna be more lucrative, so they're gonna pick it first, and then they're trying to find the hash, right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about the mining after the break. But the mempool is another concept which kind of happens within the network. So you creating this kind of on your device, on your browser, or in your kind of a mobile application, and then this transaction needs to be advertised. And then once it is advertised, it goes to the mempool. Once some miner picks it from the mempool and put it into the block, it becomes part of the ledger, right? So we have this Genesis block, the first one, then we have the block number 1, block number 2, and so on and so forth until the last block. And now they are kind of working on the next block, but this one is not found yet. So the block contains certain meta headers and information, and it contains the list of all the transactions, right? And then the new block will contain transactions, and you hope that your transaction from your advertisement will end up here. And once it ends up here, then it is part of the ledger, and then the Bob or Charlie, whoever you paid, can use it. So far, so good? Right. So let's have a break, and then we will discuss what happens if I create a new transaction with the same input twice, and I try to pay Alice and Bob at the same time from the same money, right? So let's have a 10 minutes break. All right. So then what can happen with miners? What can happen with miners is this. You have the current block, and the miners are competing. They're working on the new block. And let's say 2 miners found a new block. So this one and this one, and they advertise it. So then again, because of the propagation of information and so on, the majority will accept like one or the other. So a node, like if I advertise, like if this is a miner and you're running a node, it advertises, okay, there is a new block. This one will, so let's say this one was block number 10. So this one is number 11, right? So then it says, okay, 11 is this one. So this node will say, okay, 11 is this one. So then if someone advertises, like if I get another advertisement about block 11, I just discard it. I say, yeah, 11, I already have 11, right? I don't want to listen to 11 anymore, right? So I don't listen. And I'm waiting for 12, right? So this waits for 12. So let's say this node accepted the block 11 here. So let's call it B1 from this one, and there is a B2, right? And this node got B1, accepted it, and waits now. And then B2 was advertised, and some of the nodes accepted B2, and then some of the miners are using B2 and generating the block number 12, right? And they were faster. So they generated block 12 on top of B2, not on top of B1. So now I have block 3, which is B12, and these guys are advertising it. They're saying, oh yeah, there is B12, there is B12, right? So now I got an advertisement saying, oh, there is 12. And I say, yeah, great, because my one is 11, so I want 12. But the 12 is not using that 11. This 12 is using this 11. So what this node is gonna do is gonna say, okay, I'm dropping this one, I'm picking the longest one. I'm always picking the longest chain. So I'm gonna go here, right? So if there is another advertisement about 11, I'm gonna drop it. If there is another advertisement about 12, I'm gonna drop it. But if there is another advertisement about 13, and it happened that it is on this chain, right? Then this node say, okay, screw this, guys. I'm gonna with the longest chain now, right? So that's basically how it works. It sort of works by choosing the longest chain every time there is a new block, and the nodes are kind of picking that up, right? How likely it is that somebody is gonna come up with 13, like if network already is like at 12? It is very unlikely because you need to spend 10 minutes and you need to like find this hash and so on. Finding the hash, like where the 10 minutes comes from. The 10 minutes comes from because on average, finding the hash with so many zeros takes the fastest like supercomputers 10 minutes, right? If it takes less, the difficulty grows. If it takes like 20 minutes, the difficulty drops, right? So depending on how the network is processing the new blocks, the difficulty adjusts. But on average, it takes 10 minutes, right? So if somebody already calculated like 10 minutes, then and you are here, how quick can you do 20 minutes of work when someone is doing 10 minutes of work, right? It's like becoming less and less probable. So, but those things happen, and those things are called like soft forks, like not soft. They are just basically forks that are being dropped in the process of like finding the consensus, right? Because there are different transactions here, and then those transactions which are dropped are kind of like put back into the mempool, right? But if we had double spent, we know that if I have double spent for something and it was used here, then the copy which was there is going to be dropped because the input is already spent. So those things happen. They typically have like a small length, but there are some occasional fuck ups, and then the length is kind of bigger. So if there is like a client problem or if there are like a rolling out of the new features and there is something kind of inconsistent with the clients, sometimes those chains which are longer and are being dropped are kind of longer than 1 or 2, right? 1 or 2 happens, but like longer almost never happens. But the longest one that happened, I think it was like 6 or something, right? It was actually quite long because of the client problems. All right, so conceptually, any questions about this or any questions about how those things work? Mining is like the most boring one because it is this like brute force like machine for finding hashes, right? And it is called, so this one is called proof of work. So basically, like by finding this hash with that many zeros, you can prove that you spent the time trying it out because you have the hash, right? It's like not possible for you to cheat in any way. Like you actually have to find the hash, and finding the hash is the work that you have to do, right? Okay, so if there are no questions, let's take a little bit of a breather and then let's revise. So blockchain of blocks, easy. Each block is a data structure with all the transactions, pointer back to the previous block, fine. Transactions are like entries, who, like what's coming in and what comes out, right? And then different blockchains have different speeds, like how fast they generate new blocks or how many transactions per second they can produce, right? So the block is limited size, and then amount of transactions. Let's say you have 2,000 transactions in the block. That's fine. And then the block is generated every 10 minutes. So you have a limit, right? The peer-to-peer network is open. You can launch your node and you can join and be part of the network. Everybody can do it, right? There is no control and nobody controls the network. So nobody can say, no, you kind of need this or this. Like you can just copy the software and be part of the network. So it's permissionless. So the peer-to-peer network of validating nodes, kind of anyone can participate. You do need to have quite a lot of storage to participate because you need to have the history of all the transactions such that you can validate if the new transaction is correct or not. And then the actual computation, the actual checking of all the hashes and the correctness is cheap. It does not require, Raspberry Pi can do it. The miners require a lot of resources because they are solving this hashing puzzle. And usually, they work in a pooled environment. So multiple people pull together and they kind of work together. And then when the reward comes, they split the reward. And then wallet is like a piece of software, which is sort of like a database of all your addresses, of all your keys. You need to store the public and private parts, right? Blockchain explorers, we talked about. They show you the status of the network. Hashing, we talked about hashing, so I'm gonna skip that. Encryption, we talked about encryption, gonna skip that. Peer-to-peer networks. So there is often a confusion between centralized and distributed systems, and distributed systems and decentralized systems. In decentralized systems, there is no single point of control. In distributed systems, there is. So like Google is distributed system, but centralized. Netflix, distributed system, but centralized, right? Bitcoin is distributed and decentralized. There is no single point of control. Nobody says, okay, let's have a new version. Or nobody says, okay, let's stop for 10 minutes and let's fix something. There is nobody can say that, right? It's very autonomous system where nobody has like a control. So decentralized systems are a little bit funny because they are kind of out of control in a sense, right? The control comes from the interplay of the moving parts, which is kind of an interesting situation. So the ledger, we talked about the ledger, and the key point, you don't need to trust anybody. Anybody in the network, you don't have to trust them. They can be malicious, right? And the system will still work up to a point, right? So in Bitcoin, in that specific algorithm that Bitcoin is using, it's called like how many nodes have to be colluding for the system to break. And it's 50% or 51%, right? So if I have a network and I don't trust individual nodes, and some of the individual nodes are malicious, the system continue to work unaffected. It works like fine. But if more than half of the nodes are colluding with one another and they are malicious, then the network will break down. Like certain bad things will happen. Certain censorship will happen, or certain transactions will kind of happen, or those forks will be forced, right? Because the like small majority will swing the level of control to their favor, in their favor, right? So 51% of nodes, it doesn't mean it will kind of completely collapse. Only certain things, certain bad things will happen, like censorship or exclusion of the transactions or injection of certain transactions, right? So that's one problem. The other problem is hash power. So how many people control the generation of the blocks? This is kind of decision making, and then there is the generation of the blocks. And here it's similar. If like 51% of hash power belongs to certain like miners, then they will swing certain behaviors, right? They can even like rewrite certain history if they have slightly bigger hashing power. But with those regimes, outside of those regimes, the system is very robust. To really shut it down, you have to like attack all the participating nodes in the network. Money, right. So let's not talk about money today. I will start with the money tomorrow. So let's talk about Bitcoin. So it was launched in January 2009. The original like announcement came in November 2008. So the software was sort of available a bit earlier, but the official launch of the network itself and the paper was also available a bit earlier. But the launch of the network kind of started in January 2009. It is a self-regulating, permissionless, open source peer-to-peer system with decentralized currency. We're gonna talk about money like tomorrow. This is a light topic, so I finish about Bitcoin and then we talk a little bit about money. So it is a form of electronic cash. It is also a form of decentralized distributed database, although the database is replicated. Like it's not a nice distributed database that you have some parts here, some parts here. It's like you actually have a verbatim copy kind of everywhere. And there is no central authority, no clearing houses. It's like the transactions are irreversible. So about the irreversibility of the transactions, what will happen? So let's do this use case. What will happen if you have, so you have a wallet, you have one unspent output worth 100 Bitcoins, and then you have to pay your friend Frank, you have to pay them too, right? So you created a transaction, you used this as an input, and then you say, okay, Frank, this is Frank. Frank has 2 coins, and then you pack this transaction, you added like 0.05 fee, and then you advertise it. What will happen? How much money Frank will get? 2 coins. How much money you have left after you paid Frank 2 coins? Let's say there is no fee. No, you don't. It's all gone. Frank got 2 coins. You got 0. Who got 98? The miners. The difference between this and this is the fee, right? The actual difference of what you didn't spend is the fee. So 98 goes to whoever used your transaction in the block, the miner will get it. And you just lost, 98 coins. That happened a couple of times, like people made a mistake. They paid someone, but they forgot about the change. That 98 kind of should go to them back. So they forgot about this. And then they did this. And then like a lot of money was like lost. And in at least one situation I know, the miner who actually mined the block gave the money back to the person who did this mistake because they kind of make a big fuss about it. And the miner knew about it, so they kind of paid back. But normally you don't know who the miners are, you don't know who the people are, and the money is basically gone, right? So kind of this is like important to remember. Another thing to remember, let's say you have a suspect. So you're working with the police, you have a suspect, some, I don't know, drug case, and you seize the laptop. And then on the laptop, you found the wallet. So you found Bob, and you found the wallet. And in the wallet, there are like, I don't know, 5 addresses, right? 5 times some addresses. And say, great. Then what do you do? So you took the laptop with the wallet, and you go to the police station. You go to the judge, you say, yes, we have this guy's money, we can freeze it, we can, do stuff with it. And then the thing goes to court. And then in court, it turns out that all those addresses are empty. Right? So what has happened? So one more time, you kind of go to a suspect premises, You seize the laptop, it's unlocked, you check the wallet, it's like 1,000 Bitcoins there. And you say, great, we hit the jackpot. You kind of take the laptop, you go to the police station, blah, 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 blah. And then when the court hearing happens, it turns out the wallet is empty. So what happened? Yeah. Exactly. He had like remembered the 10 words. He reconstructed the wallet somewhere else and transferred the money somewhere else, right? So he kind of used this and transferred the money somewhere else, and then the money is gone, right? So physically having the laptop doesn't actually give you the money, right? This is a true story. It happened in Germany. The German police seized some suspects' wallets. The case went to court and the suspects cleared all the money from the wallets before the police did something, right? So the first thing you do when you seize the wallet, you transfer the money to your own wallet. And then you have control over the money, right? If it's in this wallet, whoever owns the passphrase can reconstruct the wallet anywhere, right? The money are not stored in the wallet. The money are stored in the blockchain. The wallet is only the database of the keys, right? And the keys can be generated from a passphrase which you have in your head. So your money is actually in your head, kind of, right? Because the money are not in your head or in your hard drive or in your wallet. The money are in the blockchain. Your ability to unlock the unspent outputs is the ability to spend the money. So the money is sort of stored actually in the blockchain, not on the wallet and not in the like your head. Yeah.
So you can't remove the
No, it's impossible. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, kinda. Yeah. So it's just like a convenience factor, right? So if you're using hardware wallets, it's sort of just like a convenience factor, like giving you a little bit of potential security because of certain mechanisms. The wallet unlocks the keys, but the money is not in the ledger. The money are kind of in the blockchain. And also the hardware wallets are a little bit like the police kind of likes the hardware wallets. They really hate the brain wallets because with the hardware wallets, you can kind of find exploits and you can get in. If you're using like your brain wallet, like there is nothing they can do, right? Yeah. So yeah, so this is important to kind of remember. Right. So exactly. So all the transactions are recorded in the network, and it is the network that keeps the money, not the wallets, right? So a lot of people think the money are in the wallets. If I lose my phone, I lose the money. No, 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 no. The money you don't lose if you lose the phone. You lose the money if you lose the passphrase, if you use the actual like keys, right? All right, so there is an upper limit of how many Bitcoins will be. It's around 21 million. The smallest unit is Satoshi, and Bitcoins are with 8 decimal places. So one Bitcoin has 8 decimal places, right? So one Satoshi is here. It's this is kind of a one Satoshi. So 100 million Satoshis is one Bitcoin, right? Yeah, we talked about transactions. Block, we talked about first transaction is special transaction. We call it a Coinbase. That's why Coinbase, the company is called Coinbase because of that term. Like they liked it, so they used it. We solving the hash puzzle. We talked about it. So every block is generated every 10 minutes. Every 2016 blocks, roughly about 2 weeks. The network checks on average how long the blocks were generated. If the on average blocks were longer than 10 minutes, the difficulty can drop, which almost never happens. And then if the blocks were generated like 8 minutes, the difficulty will go up such that it will kind of try to keep it at around 10 minutes per block. And then every 210,000 blocks, the BTC reward halves. So there have been those halving events. And yeah, the last one is 1 point something. So the network kind of halves. So every block references the hash of the previous block, but it doesn't know about the future blocks. So it is like a linked list backwards, right? And the longest chain always wins, and the shorter chains become orphans. So the orphans are kind of discarded. And the length, so this is also kind of a geeky fact. So if I explain to you that if we have this 10, 11, 12, that rule, it could be possible for somebody to sort of play the game and lower the difficulty such that they can generate quickly very long chain. And to prevent it, we not only take the length, but we also like weighted with the difficulty at each block, what each block had, right? So if I say I have 13, 14, 15, 16, but I lower the difficulty to such a level that it's really easy for me to generate it, but someone comes and says, no, I don't have such a long chain, but I have 13 with the really high difficulty, then this one will win because we weight the length together with the difficulty of the blocks, right? To prevent people like abusing the longest block rule. Okay, so what is the blockchain actually doing? It is a solution to a consistency problem. So if we have a network of untrusted nodes and we want to agree on something, we have a problem because we have those malicious nodes kind of trying to influence the decision. And blockchain is basically solving that data consistency problem in a network which has not only trusted nodes, but those untrusted nodes as well, right? Yes. So the transactions are irrevocable, non-revocable, irreversible, because once the transaction happens and is included, then that's it, especially like in the longest, like in the history. And also the blockchain has this natural clock. The natural clock is the counter of the blocks, right? So it is not like related to real-time wall clock, but it kind of ticks as the blocks are generated, right? So we can say later when we will discuss smart contracts and we will talk about some behaviors, we can say lock the money, like I have the unspent, I have a transaction with the unspent output, and I can say this output cannot be spent for the next 10 blocks, right? So I can say 10 minutes times 10, it's roughly 100 minutes. So I can say for about 100 minutes, but I cannot express it in minutes. I have to say for 10 blocks, right? So if like somebody tries to spend it within those 10 blocks, it will not work. It will only work after the blockchain will reach a certain block count, right? So I can produce some logic. I can not only say there is money here and like Bob spends it, I can make services and I can make some more intelligent behavior of how and when this is spent. We will talk a little bit about it tomorrow. So right, so quite fascinating is that it is a very like a very non-just computer science problem. Like most computer science problems are computer science problems, but with blockchain technology and now kind of with AI as well, it's something that it's very technical. All these details of how it works, like on the technical side, is important because it kind of shapes what is and what is not possible. But at the same time, you have a lot of legal, consequences and so on. Like, for example, with the financial system, it's very clear about cross-border money flow, right? Like money leaving Norway to going somewhere else, it has to go through very controlled system. And with cryptocurrencies, there is no concept of the border. Like, you know, anybody can be anywhere. And then for me to send money here or to Nigeria is exactly the same. It's just like making a transaction from input to output, and there is no concept of a border, right? So then how you gonna deal with it? So it is kind of fascinating that the law does not deal with it, actually. So for the private people, the law didn't really change, and it sort of says, well, we don't know how to deal with it, right? But for the institutions, for the companies who deal with cryptocurrencies, they have to comply with this anti-money laundering, you know, regulations and the cross-border regulations as well. So they need to know like to whom the money go and so on. But it is on institutional level. Like for us, like for private people, it became kind of nice because you can make international transfers really quickly, relatively easily, and without any sort of fees or repercussions, right? So the law is, and it is also quite interesting because to explain some of the things to lawyers is really difficult. Like there is no concept of decentralized organization in the law. In the law, everything is, there is this like legal personality, and everything is either institutionally responsible or personally responsible. But there is no concept that nobody owns it, right? So for example, they have a problem with open source software because they say, like somebody is responsible for the open source software. But in reality, there isn't. Like it's a group of people, they all contributed to something, and it's like a group responsibility, but a lot of those people are anonymous. And then how you like put a blame or how you legally hold someone responsible if the participating parties are anonymous, right? So it is kind of a fascinating place to be because it's quite complicated. Like it is by nature very multidisciplinary and quite complicated. Um, yeah, so a lot of uptake. Most countries are looking into using kind of technology like this for their own currencies. So central bank cryptocurrencies. A lot of institutions are looking into it. Facebook looked into it and it was a flop. So like the Facebook currency didn't work out. It is like I was reading a paper recently for a conference, and they had a metric of how risky or how unreliable a currency is. And the Facebook cryptocurrency was kind of scoring really high on the metric that they were proposing. Same as some shit coins, you know, meme coins and so on. All right, so let's see, how are we doing with time? Right, so it's almost 5:30. I think we stop here. What do you think? So we stop here, and then tomorrow morning we talk a little bit about money, and then I will talk a little bit about smart contracts in Bitcoin, and then we will kind of pivot to Ethereum, and like start doing a little bit of work towards the exam point with the smart contracts. And then on Thursday, we can do a little bit of forensics and some investigations, like where the money go and how it worked. All right. If you have any questions, you can ask me. And if you have any questions at home, you can ask me through Canvas as well. I have access to Canvas now, and I can respond. I will put the slides and the Mentimeter on Canvas today as well. So thank you very much. Bring your questions for tomorrow.
Will you discuss what makes a cryptocurrency possible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.